Good morning, older audiences. We are getting so close to the end. So I actually kind of peeked at the length of the upcoming chapters since we don't have very many left. And we're going to go ahead and do 3 chapters today. So then that way it's going to even out by the end. So 3 chapters today, 2 on Sunday, and then 2 on Tuesday, and then we are going to be done with the first book of Everworld, Search for Senna, and then we're going to move on to the next one called Land of Lost, and I'm just so excited that we are reading these books. Anyway, okay, so we left off with, they were leaving Loki's land with Thorolf. Okay, chapter 26. We reached the ship. The sides were not much higher than our rowboat, but it was still a chore getting the 3 landlubbers up and over. Harold Goldtooth and his sons, Sancho and Sven Sword-Eater, Thorolf said. He nodded to midship where the crew was rigging a striped tent. Harold Goldtooth was easy to spot. When he grinned, which was not often, you saw 2 flashes of gold right where his canine teeth had been. I'd seen him the night before at the feast. He glanced at us, decided we were not important, and went back to discussing business with his 2 sons. One of the sons was the young Viking with a stab wound through both his cheeks. I was guessing he was the one called Sword Eater. Sancho? Christopher asked. That's a Norse name? There has obviously been some intermarriage, Christopher, Jaleel said. Did you happen to notice that King Olaf was a brother, didn't you? You sure he's not really just tan? Suddenly a horn blast. It echoed through the harbor, then again, and a third time. A roar went up from 1,000 throats. On shore, women waved goodbye, but there were women aboard too. Evidently some Vikings brought their wives, or at least their close personal friends. Harold Goldtooth stepped out of the tent just long enough to give us a curt, businesslike nod to the officer who must have been his captain. The captain in turn nodded to the guy I assumed was the mate. I had no clear sense of what ranks and functions there were aboard this ship. No one was wearing a uniform, and I saw no insignias of rank. "Man the oars!" the mate bellowed, and there followed a wild tramping and pushing and shoving as men ran to their appointed posts. Thorolf left us standing, feeling stupid and out of place. 4 dorks from a different universe. "When does the steward show us to our cabins?" Christopher asked. I walked over to an empty bench, sat down, and worked the long, heavy oar into the oarlock as I'd seen the crew do. The mate strode over. "You're cargo. You don't need to row." "I'll row," I said. The man laughed. "You'll foul the other oars. Go away. Stand with your woman and the other minstrels." It was a test. At least that's how I saw it. "If I foul another rower, I will stand with the others," I said. "Up oars!" the mate yelled in response. All the oars came up out of the water. A sense of anticipation filled the air. Excitement. This wasn't a crew being driven against its will. There were grins and nods and exchanged winks. "Stroke!" A new voice hollered, and all the oars hit the water at the same moment. I kept my eyes glued on the man in front of me. He wasn't big, but his bare back was nothing but rippling muscles. He moved, I moved. Up and stroke. The bosun, for lack of a better term, called the rhythm. The ship began to make way amazingly easy. Not that the rowing would be easy after an hour, but for now it was more a matter of catching the precise pace, the exact flow of synchronized movements. The cry of stroke, stroke, was replaced by a drum, pounding hard on the start of each pull, tapping gently on the return stroke. I pulled hard, putting my back into it. Thorolf was 3 benches up from me on the other side, doing the same. There were 15 of us to a side, 30 men pulling in unison. And all around us, visible as I rolled forward at the end of a stroke, were ships. Some larger, some smaller, all cutting the water, all moving. It was an awesome sight. An awesome spectacle that I was a part of. Something no one had seen in the real world for centuries. A Viking fleet putting to sea. Stroke with the drum beat. Pull, 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 then lift. Roll forward, stretch out, way out, then stroke and push with your legs, thigh muscles burning, and the narrow, hollow draft ship would leap through the air. Harold Goldtooth, a rowdy voice called out from off the port side. Harold Goldtooth, do you have women rowing that slow, diseased pig of a boat? Should I send some of my true hearty men across to help you before those weak-limbed, mineral-diseased old women you call a crew faints from their exertions? His crew gave him a roar of approval, followed by shouted, obscene suggestions relating to all of us. Harold yelled back, Edric, you senile, effeminate dog. Thor himself could not blow the wind that could speed your filthy wreck of a ship faster than the dragon shield. This, of course, was the signal for our crew to taunt and ridicule Edric's crew. My white mare against your best bull, Edric shouted, laying down the bet. First to pass the line of the points. Yeah, it was juvenile, like junior high school with swords, but it worked. We'd only been pretending to row. Now we rowed. The drumbeat accelerated and we hauled oar, yelling like idiots on each pull, the Vikings egging one another on. My hands were soon blood raw. My back was screaming. My legs were on fire. My arms were lead. I'd probably never be able to unbend my fingers again. But all second thoughts, all doubts, all dreams and memories of dreams were set aside as my world honed down to the rhythm and the strain. It was a dumb, energy-draining race. I was on my way to a battle that was none of my business, surrounded by simple, illiterate men who are no part of my universe, on a mission from a lunatic, mythical god. And it occurred to me then that moment I was as happy as I'd ever been in my life. Just beyond the point, we caught a following breeze. The Viking ships were great for their time and place, but they weren't much good at sailing close to the wind. They could tack, move back and forth at angles to a wind that was against us, but only slowly and clumsily. Any weekend sailor in the real world could have easily sailed circles around these ships. And the Viking ships had no weapons, aside from the men. A ship like the Constitution, a war of 1812 era ship armed with cannons, could have blown an infinite number of Viking ships out of the water. But this was a ship designed 800 years or so before the Constitution, which made me wonder, how long had Everworld existed? When it had formed, if that's what had happened, how many local years had passed without the Vikings ever learning to use fore and aft sails, or at least multiple masts? The breeze stayed fair for all that afternoon and evening. Once underway, there wasn't much for me to do. I could row well enough, but I didn't know how to trim a square sail, and no one was going to put me on the steering oar. Christopher and Jaleel and I were given a few inches of deck as a bed. They rigged up a tarp that shielded us from most of the spray, but it was going to be a hard, cold, wet night. April slept under the tent. The back half belonged to the women, wives and mistresses. Harold, his son Sancho, and a couple of the higher-ranking guys slept there. Not much better off than us peasants, but better enough that it made Jaleel grumble. Getting to sleep wasn't easy. I knew what sleep would mean, so did everyone. We made plans to get together on the other side. But that wasn't easy. I fell asleep, lulled by the rise and fall of the ship under me and by my own deep physical exhaustion. I slept. Grande latte and a no-whip venti mocha, the cashier called. I stared at her. What? Grande latte and a no-whip venti mocha, she repeated. I stared at the espresso machine before me. I stared at the stainless steel container of foamed milk in my left hand. I stared at the customer who was staring at me. I reached down and grabbed a handful of my dark green apron. Starbucks. Where I worked 3 nights a week, I was at work. Now the cashier was staring at me too. Grande latte and no whip venti mocha, I repeated faintly. I started to make the drinks. The motions were automatic, flicking the coffee from the grinder, twisting on the steam, pumping the chocolate syrup for the mocha. Is that skim? The customer asked me. He was a middle-aged guy with a gray ponytail. Do you want skim? Yeah, make it skim. I changed milk containers and began to steam the skim milk. What else was I supposed to do? I was at work. And it was a good job for someone my age. I was 16, and the manager had stretched the rules to let me train as a barista, the guy who makes the drinks. It paid better than Mickey D's, and the humiliation quotient was lower. I worked 3 6-hour shifts, earning $8.50 an hour plus a share of the tips. I needed the $120 a week I cleared after taxes. I had college to think about, not to mention a car from this decade. This was in my head, all that rational, sensible stuff. It was in my head right next to the crazed voice yelling about Vikings. What flavor are those biscotti? The customer asked me, since the cashier was busy with the next customer. I felt like screaming. How the hell do I know what flavor the lousy biscotti are, you ponytailed freak? I'm asleep on the deck of a Viking longboat on my way to war. But I knew the answer. I mean, somehow I knew what flavor of biscotti we had. Amaretto and chocolate chip, I said. The guy turned up his nose. Grande iced cappuccino, 2 tall cappuccinos, the new customer said. 1 grande iced cap and 2 tall cappuccino, the cashier repeated for my benefit. I flicked coffee, tamped it down, punched the button. I should call Jaleel. That was the plan. Once we were over, we'd all hook up, call one another, get together, and try to make sense of everything. No time now, though. I was at work. You couldn't just walk out on work. This was a good job. Anthony, my boss, was a good guy. I had a duty. A duty? A duty to make coffee for snotty yuppies? How was this my life? How was making coffee my life? As soon as I was done with this next customer, I'd make a call. Jaleel first. He told me his number. They were unlisted, so I'd have to remember. This was crazy. Here you go, sir. Grande skim latte, venti mocha, no whipped cream. I worked the tops on and handed the drinks over. Ka-ching! The cash register drawer opened and closed with a bang. People sitting at tables, sipping drinks. The warm room with wood and soft lights. Bags of coffee lined up, stocked up. Shelves of cups and coffee makers. Someone needed to restock the... I grabbed my head. This was crazy. This was... A foot tramped down on my outstretched hand, one of the crewmen moving aft to tighten a stay. I blinked and looked around. The ship. Snoring Vikings all around. Jaleel and Christopher closest by. Jaleel snoring. Christopher, eyes open, looking at the stars. I was exhausted, tired in every muscle, every bone. I drifted back to sleep. I released the key. My car. I was in my car. Morning. Something had just happened here in the real world. I searched my memory. My mom. That was it. She hadn't done my laundry. No clean shirt. I had to wear some pathetic raggedy thing from like 3 years ago. Why did I care? Oh, yeah, we had all had dinner together the night before. Me, my mom, this guy she was seeing, Eddie. That was it. Eddie. She wanted Eddie and me to be friends, to get along. I knew she was thinking about getting married. I knew it, although she denied it. The final step was getting me and Eddie so we could stand each other. It would be heavy lifting, that would. He didn't like me, and the reverse. He was an assistant professor of Romance languages at the university. A shirt that didn't fit and made it look like I thought I was going golfing, and the memory of a huge fight with my mom the night before, and now the car wouldn't start. I climbed out, raised the hood, and then kicked the front fender till I thought I'd broken my foot. I cursed the car and then moved on to cursing life in general. Then, calmer, I unscrewed the air filter and leaned over to look down inside the old-fashioned carburetor. From the carburetor, cold salt water sprayed. I opened my eyes. The ship had caught a freak wave on a beam. The spray had slapped me awake, but only partly. I opened my eyes and closed them, wondering if I'd ever be able to fall back to the four of us. Jaleel, April, Christopher, me, all sitting cross-legged on the grass, outside the school, books open in our laps, sandwiches and wrappers, small bags of chips, kids all around, lounging, talking, joking, eating lunch. Outside the cafeteria, out on the common, it was a nice day. Not night, day. Not Starbucks, not my car, school. You two must have woken up, April said, looking at me and Christopher. Jaleel jerked his thumb at me. No, he just crossed over. You can tell by the confused where am I look on his face. I'm here, I managed to say. Someone stepped on my hand, woke me up. Christopher's looking at the stars. Christopher made a face. I'm not looking at the stars. I'm right here, looking at the three of you. Just because he, me, the other me isn't here doesn't mean I'm deaf, dumb, and blind, and you have to act like I'm some senile old man. He, Everworld Chris, popped in yesterday evening, so I got a memory update. I know about the Viking ship and us, you, whoever, being on the way to start trouble with freaking Aztecs. Both versions of him are equally annoying, Jaleel said to April. A second later, Christopher frowned, his face confused. Meeting called to order, Jaleel said sardonically. The other Chris has joined us. This is beyond nuts, Christopher said. Normal me can't tell if he's losing his mind or what. There is no normal you, I said in an attempt at a joke. I'd never gotten my car going that morning. Yes, that morning. I'd ended up taking the city bus because the school bus had come and gone. Let's talk fast, April said. I'm sleeping back under the tent with the women. Someone will wake me up any second. Hey, try being out in the open, I said. What are you complaining about? April made an amused face. I'm with the wives and the girlfriends, and these Vikings aren't exactly discreet. Or even civilized. I'm getting my sex education class here, and I managed to make matters worse by handing out Advil to Harold's wife who was having cramps, and now he's enjoying himself because she's feeling better. And the two of them want to give me a goat as a thank you gift. I'm trapped in the middle of Love Secrets of the Norsemen. Not to mention that in the dark, a couple of these guys have accidentally, on purpose, plopped down on top of me. Except for that last part, I trade places with you. So what do we talk about? Christopher asked brightly. Do you think the Bears will change quarterbacks? How do we stay here? April demanded, showing no interest in joking. How do we hang on to this, to being here? How do we stop getting dragged back to Everworld? Jaleel nodded in agreement. That would be issue number 1. I started to say something, then stopped. We can't just stay asleep over there, can we? April asked, knowing the answer. No, Jaleel said anyway. I don't think the Vikings have discovered sleeping pills. This was fun. In an insane kind of way, Christopher said, but I have a life. Okay, not much of one, but better than the life that involves getting killed by Aztecs. There must be a way, April said, not to... Look, I don't want to sound like a ditz, but my friends are acting weird around me. Like they don't trust me anymore. It's all this stuff. I mean, of course I'm different than I was. Look what's happening to me. Her voice rose to a near shriek. She took a couple of breaths and turned to form her face into its usual lines. It's like being that bag lady downtown, the one who talks to voices. I'm living this nice, normal life, but in my head I have memories of being in Everworld. And then I slip back across. It's like this second personality. Like me, but not me, takes over. This is a textbook definition of insanity. I feel like me, only not. I'm here, only not. There's someone in my head, but it's not me. Christopher saying. Sorry, suddenly I was channeling Pink Floyd. I remembered the fight with my mom, freaking out and kicking my car, more emotion than I usually show, less in control than I usually am. April was right. We were living through something that was very close to insanity. Maybe it was insanity. How would you know? I want to be home, April said. Christopher nodded. Jaleel shot a look at me, questioning. How about you, David? I'd been off in my own thoughts, still assimilating the memories of the last couple of days. This was all taking place in a single night's sleep. But Starbucks had been last evening, an hour ago, there, 12 hours here. Senna, I blurted. There's still Senna. I want to find her. True love, Christopher sneered. Here's a thought. Find another girlfriend. Senna's gone. Even if she weren't gone, she's trouble. No, I want to find her. I'm not giving up till I do. Kind of a moot issue, Jaleel said wearily, since we don't know how to stay here, how to escape Everworld. Yeah, well, if it's something we want to do, I think the answer's probably over there in Everworld, I said. If? April echoed, staring at me hard. If? I snapped awake. No one stepped on my hand, no splash of water. I simply woke up. Jaleel and Christopher slept, presumably April too, back with the women. I was relieved. And that's it for today. I can't wait to keep going on Sunday, and then Tuesday we're gonna get the end of the book. I'm so excited. So y'all have a good day, and